What's up, Canes? What's up, Canes? Can you hear the music, Canes? How many series in a row are we going to blow to teams we can actually beat? It's getting insane at this point. We should have won 3 straight series. I mean, it's hard to say should have won 3 straight, but I can understand like 2 out of 3. Um, I'd be interested to see the top 25. Uh, that's gonna be that will be dropping here soon, and we are finally home. Yeah, home against UNC, and like, listen, UNC hadn't dominated. You know what I mean? Like UNC's been hasn't done what people have thought they were going to do. Let's go to. Actually, I know what I'm going to do. Actually, I need to do this first. I mean, it's going to be a short stream tonight, but I just wanted to go over some of the. You can't hear the music? Okay, yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's weird. I can't. It's telling me it's playing. Let's change. But it's not playing. I can't hear it in my headphones. And you're saying you can't hear it either? Because it's telling me it's playing. So, all right, let's go to conferences. All right. Yeah, I don't know why I don't know why the music is not working, but oh well. All right, so let's look at the interesting. So UNC finally wins a series. They beat Boston College. They did win. They did lose one game in that series. Virginia is now 3-6. Duke had improved to 5-4. So Duke has kind of turned it on late. Virginia sitting at 12-10, which is crazy. I mean, think about this, guys. Virginia is going to be out of the top 25, and A&M's out of the top 25. So that's your preseason number 1 and number 2 that are now out of the top 25. Like Virginia for sure will be out after losing to Duke. I think because they were 23 going into the weekend. Top of the ACC right now is Georgia Tech and Wake are tied because they've played 9 games. Florida State is 5-1, but they've only played 6 games, so they can't be ranked in the top. Clemson's 4-2. And won a big series over Wake. So Clemson's legit. And this is the thing about Clemson, that if you look at their numbers, their starting pitching is really good. Their offense has been solid, but there's not a lot that like really jumps off the page, but they just win. Like they just beat teams. Today they were down 6-0. I don't know at what inning it. I think maybe it was kind of early, but they were down 6 runs. They ended up coming back and beating Wake to win the series. Cal, I believe, Cal goes 2-1 against Stanford. So Stanford loses their first series in ACC play. Or did Stanford get swept? Yeah, Stanford got swept. Okay. So that was a big swing for them. Louisville loses the series of VT. We called it here, guys. We called it. That just seemed like the most obvious series for an upset because it was in Blacksburg. Louisville was not projected to be a top like a top 15 team and had really played well so far. So you're kind of looking at like maybe they're not like the most talented team, but they've played well. And then Virginia Tech also has played well, but they're not expected to be this amazing team. But they've played way better than I think people thought they were going to be, and they have a better team than people thought they were going to have. And so it's just kind of an obvious pick that that's probably going to swing towards Virginia Tech. Miami is 1-5, but listen, Canes, you got Virginia at 6 losses, you got Boston College at 6 losses, you got Virginia Tech at 5 losses, you got North Carolina at 5 losses, and then Notre Dame at 8. So, like, Miami is not like in nearly as bad a shape. Obviously, like this weekend against weekend against UNC, is going to be crucial. And to me, just being honest, I think they have to win the series. If they go to like 2-7, again, that means you got to go 13 and 11 to end it. Or no, you have to go 13-8 the remaining part of the season in conference. Cougs, what's up, man? Cougs won the series versus UCF. Yeah, that's a big win. UCF's legit. UCF's really good. So that's actually like a massive series win for Houston. So right now in the SEC, tops of the SEC are Georgia, Arkansas, Tennessee, and Texas at 5-1. After that, you got Alabama, LSU, Oklahoma, Vandy, Auburn, Ole Miss at 4-2, and then you got Kentucky at 2-4. South Carolina's 1-5. I mean, this is crazy to say. South Carolina's 1-5. Mississippi State 1-5. Florida 0-6. Texas A&M 0-6. Missouri 0-6. Florida's start again is like, I mean, it's insane. I think after the Tennessee sweep, you think, Tennessee's just that good. It wasn't like a huge surprise that Tennessee would sweep. And it was in Knoxville. So you're kind of like, all right, it's in Knoxville, first SEC series, it's packed, and Tennessee's got a legitimate like number one team. So it wasn't like I didn't take it. I didn't think they should even fall that far in the rankings after that series loss, the series sweep. But Georgia going into Gainesville and sweeping, and again, game 2, go ahead home run in the 9th for Georgia. I don't know. I think Florida's still going to be fine, but definitely like that's not the start you wanted to the season. I think everyone's pretty surprised by that. Let's see. Did you see the moment we put in D2 transfer Fisher? I don't know. I can't remember, Canes. I can't remember. I watched it. I was over at Dusty's. I know he sent you that picture. But it's a must-win. Cougs it's a must-win for both Miami and UNC, in my opinion. It's definitely not a must-win for UNC because UNC is like 4-5, which is like they're one game below 500. So they're not like if they lose it, sure, it makes it harder, but they're not. It's not nearly as must-win. It may be if UNC wants to host, it's must-win, but And again, I guess that is kind of, if you're UNC, that coming into the season, that's kind of what you expected to do. So I guess I get what you're saying as far as must win and stuff like that. Um, I think we have a solid team that battles for each other. I just think our coaching decisions are costing us. Trusting a guy like Fisher who hasn't shown us nothing since Game 4 of the season, FAU. It's game 26 on Wednesday. It's been 22 games since he's given us anything of substance, and he's the first guy out of the pen in a rubber match with bases loaded. He's crumbled against Wake, UConn, FSU. Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't watch the games close. I mean, certainly have not watched the games close enough to criticize anything and what coaches are doing. And I think, I mean, listen, guys, like what you have to remember is that like a lot of times there's things that you don't know as fans. We don't know who are watching the game. Like maybe guys are sick, guys are hurt. They threw too many pitches yesterday. And so sometimes it's like, well, these are our options, and you as a fan may think, well, that I don't know why you went with that, but there's a reason for it. And sometimes your hands are tied, right? So I mean, these coaches they can't just go to the guy that they want to go to every time, and in a lot of cases they almost never can, right? But I listen. If you think that's what's happening, you think that's what's happening. I can't comment on it because I don't know for sure. I haven't watched enough of the games. Um, I can say this: there's no coach that makes perfect coaching decisions, right? I mean, sometimes you look great, sometimes you look dumb. It's just the nature of the game. I mean, baseball, it's an imperfect. You can you can bring in the right guy, call the right pitch, and it still gets hit a mile. Like that's the nature of the game. And it doesn't mean it was the wrong pitch afterward. Like you have to go off the information you have and everything like that. But coaching in baseball is tough, man, because you have to understand, like in football, and I always compare it to football because I think there's as much value. A coach is just as important to a baseball team as he is to a football team. But what people think is that football coaches are way more important because like the defensive coordinators calling the schemes and everything like that, and the offensive coordinators making the play calls, and the head coach is usually responsible on one side of the ball or whatever, or like Urban Meyer, he's covering special teams and he's the special teams guy. But in baseball, what's even more difficult is like you're not really in control, right? I mean, you're in control, but again, you make the perfect pitching call, like you bring in the right guy, you pitch him 100% the way he should be pitched, based on what you're seeing. The guy looks terrible on a slider, he's out front off plane, and then he makes that dual adjustment in one swing and hits a bomb. Like sometimes you're going to get beat, and that's just how it is. Yesterday was a day for him to shut up the fan base. Instead, the noise got louder, in my opinion, because of him trusting Fisher. Fisher is a fifth-year senior who has a lot of experience, but against the good teams, he has been BP and walks. Yeah, I mean, again, like you could be right, Canes. You could be wrong. Again, and like the thing is this: you'll never know. You'll really never know. And the thing, the easiest to see is the pitch calling. Like pitch calling is something you can watch, and if you have a fairly deep understanding about the game, or I'm not going to act like if you don't know much about the game, you can't really discuss pitch calling typically. But pitch calling is the one thing where you can watch and be like, man, why are you calling that? Stuff like that. But unless you have that availability sheet in front of you, and you know exactly which pitchers were available in that specific situation, what the game plan was, right? Because these guys have game plans. It's like if this happens to the starter, we're going to go to this guy first. Like, this is going to be our first guy out. And then depending on how he goes, like our emergency arm, if he gets lit up, is this guy. So like these guys usually have it planned out. And so unless you have that availability card or the lineup card that has that stuff on there, uh, it's hard to judge like why did he bring that guy in. Like for example, last weekend against Pitt with Georgia Tech, I was wondering in Sunday in my mind, I was like, man, why hasn't Jalen Payton come in yet? Why hasn't he come in? And come to find out, he was not available, right? So there was a reason why he didn't pitch. But if you're watching that game and you don't have like that didn't get announced anywhere, right? That's not on social media. If you don't know that, um, you're thinking, well, they were saving him for the ninth inning, and then by the time it was time for him to pitch, like the game was out of hand, or not out of hand really, but like they were behind, and so didn't throw him. So yeah, like it's you just don't know sometimes. Like a kid could have showed up, and like Kent Schmidt didn't play for Georgia Tech at all this weekend because he was sick. He was sick, but that didn't go out on social media. So again, there's things you just don't know. But what you like, I bring up pitch calling because the pitcher's repertoire, the situation, based on his stuff, what's going to be most effective against certain hitters based on what side of the plate they hit from, everything like that. That's a thing you can be like, I don't know why he's calling that pitch or whatever. But bringing in arms, it's different, and making adjustments to the lineup and stuff because you just don't know typically. Now at the bigger, like the really big programs that have like a bunch of media people, a lot of times that question gets asked, like, "Hey, Jalen Payton didn't pitch at all this weekend. What's going on there?" And then who maybe you get an answer, maybe you don't. But it's a lot of programs that question just doesn't get answered a lot of the times. But I think that the surprise of the weekend, and listen, it's going to be interesting to see what happens at Virginia because obviously O'Connor had that fiery post game interview after the midweek loss, and then they lose 2 of 3 to Duke in Charlottesville. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in that lineup because he basically said like if guys don't want to put in the effort and do the things we need to do to win, like we'll find guys that will. So that'll be interesting to see. Does anyone know if Troy won the series against Coastal? I can't remember. I know they lost yesterday, but I don't know if they won Friday. I can't remember. And obviously a big series was Texas LSU. I think LSU played really well. Obviously didn't win the series. It was in Austin. Texas played really, really well too. But even with the series loss for LSU, I didn't come out of that series thinking like, oh, they're not nearly as good as people think. Like I think they played well, right? They got a really good team. Miami, especially, we don't answer many questions down here, which could make things worse. Yeah, I mean, and that's a lot of Power Four programs. Like the media, like you see it mostly in the SEC, where there's so many media guys that like someone asks the question, and it takes some guts from a media guy to say that because you're kind of in a way questioning the coach, and so you may get a fiery response, right? Um, who do you take more away from, Georgia performance or UF getting swept? Um, I mean, listen, Georgia's legit. Like Georgia's legit. I think their pitching is still the pitching is still kind of a question mark for me, but you go into Gainesville and sweep Florida, like that doesn't just happen, That's not just a fluke. Um and listen, Florida's got a really good team. So it's interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see how Florida responds now. I mean, I thought Florida was going to win the series just because they came off of that sweep against Tennessee or getting swept against Tennessee. So I think you learned more about Georgia as a team than Florida. I think you learned that Georgia's offense is legitimate, like super legit. One of the best offenses in the country, no doubt. And the pitching really stepped up. Like the pitching did enough to let them sweep. So that's a good sign if you're a Georgia fan, because I think the question mark going in is like, is the pitching going to be able to hold up? And so far over two SEC series, like you've done well. Saturday night, the Penn had electric stuff but couldn't throw strikes. LSU versus Tech, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and again, that happens, right? But they were still they were in the game. You know what I mean? So I think LSU's, and they got a lot of. Here's the thing about LSU, they got a lot of young guys too. They're kind of like Tennessee in a way. Like LSU and Tennessee both are playing a lot of young guys. Way more like Georgia, for example, has got a bunch of seniors and grad transfers, right? So they're going to have to reload next year. And every team will, but like LSU and Tennessee both have like some serious building blocks in their lineup as well. It was in Gainesville as well. Yeah, ball doesn't fly there. Definitely not as good of a hitting park as as Athens as it is in Athens. Um, yeah, I think you learned more about Georgia. I think they got fight. Um, Again, I mean, Wes Johnson just continues to impress. I mean, he's just a heck of a coach, right? We've talked about it last year. They were not projected to play the way they played, and when when you're not projected to be like a top team in the SEC or even like a top middle of the pack team, and you end up doing what they did last year, that just boils down to coaching, 100%. And then UC Irvine sweeps Santa Barbara, I believe. So I mean, that was a. I think everyone realized this was going to be a really good series, but I don't think anyone thought Irvine was going to sweep. So that was a big one too. That was a really big series. Texas won. Texas won the series. They won 2 of 3. Gators' offense isn't very good, and they have key arms hurt, bad combo. Yeah, and that's something as well. Like Florida was without their Friday starter and a few other injuries. So again, that's definitely something. Um, the question is like, would it have changed at all, or would it have changed enough to maybe get one win, possibly? But I mean, Georgia dominated a, a few of those games, right? 15-4 today, like that's just a domination. It's not even their Friday starter. They're missing Frankie Mendez as well. Good bullpen pitcher from Miami, but like you and I just said, would that have mattered against the Masters of Georgia? Yeah, it's again, it's maybe you get one win out on the weekend, but it's just hard to tell. Texas beating them is a surprise. It was at LSU. LSU will go further than Texas in the postseason. They are a deep team. It was at Texas. It was in Austin. So, you know, like I've told you guys a bunch. I mean, home field advantage is massive, especially at those places like in the ACC, for example, like Clemson, Florida State, um, like the places that really sell out crowds. So, like in Texas or at LSU or at Florida, at Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi State, SEC's full of them, right? That just fill up their stadiums big time. Um, Playing at those places is a big advantage when you're the home team. Yeah, home field advantage in the SEC makes more sense, and there are like, listen, the ACC is getting a lot better, but I will say that is an advantage the SEC holds definitely. Now, when it gets to like regionals and stuff like super regionals, every place fills up, so it's not a big deal. But in the SEC, home field advantage is massive. It's undeniable. Recruiting question now. How many 2027 guys are you currently working with? I see a bunch that I following you. We have a good number. That's mainly the guys we're taking on now are 27s. We still are taking on 26s as well. 25s, it's got to be special cases. And they have to have the right expectations, because at this point for 25s, there's just not a lot out there. Um, there is like a recruiting window that does open up slightly when the portal opens, because let's say if a team just loses way more guys in the portal than they expected, they're definitely going to try to replace those guys, a majority of those spots, with guys from the portal, but they may have room to be like, if a high school kid that's kind of peaked late and is still available, like they'll take a look. But most of the guys we're taking on now are 27 or 26s and 27s, because the 27s are obviously coming up on the communication date, August 1st. Um, and so we're able to talk with coaches on behalf of them before that date, just to really kind of streamline the process and make sure, they know where they're at all summer, right? If a coach comes to see them play, and we can talk with them and just get kind of, hey, what'd you think? What was good, what was bad, where's he at for you guys right now, stuff like that. I got a few more minutes in me before I got to go to sleep. I think the 27 class is super deep in Florida, especially down here. I mean, the classes in Florida are always super deep. I mean, like if you think about recruiting hotbeds, it's Florida, Georgia, Texas, and California. And you could throw like Ohio up in there. Um, Oklahoma's always got a lot of good players. Nevada around the Vegas area has always got a bunch of good players. But I mean, Florida is probably the number one state. If you had to go, if you had to rank them, you probably right now. I mean, I think there's a lot of talent in California. But to me, I think we're like Florida and Texas for me are the top two. I just think they're because they're usually ballers, but for some reason, the guys from Florida, guys from Texas tend to be pretty tough too. I don't know why. Not saying there's not a lot of tough guys from Georgia, but I just feel like across college baseball, you see so many guys that are really good from those states. And again, like it's not like Georgia's far behind or anything like that. Georgia's one of the best, especially with just like the recruiting hub being in Georgia. Um, but Texas just, I mean, it just seems to be Texas has all the guys throwing 100. Florida's got all the athletes, shortstops, center fielders, stuff like that. But I mean, those are the big four: is Georgia, Florida, Texas, and California. It's just where all the good players are. And again, there's little hotbeds all around a bunch of other states, but those are the states that are just most densely populated with really good players. Why do you think that is? In football, it's the opposite, in my opinion. I think Florida has the guys that are least ready to play because of how much we pay the coaches. Yeah, I mean, I just think again, like the warm weather states have a huge advantage in baseball because you can't play baseball, and I'm not even a big fan of guys playing baseball year round. But if you want to do that, you can do that in Texas. You can do that in Florida, in Georgia. In some regards, like there does become a time in Georgia where it is too cold. But like if you're in South Florida, it's never too cold to play. In Texas, obviously there is a few months where it's really cold as well. In Southern California, you can play all year round. So it just seems to be like the warm weather states. It's just where guys play baseball more densely, right? Up in the Northeast and the Midwest, like there's just almost half the year it's so cold. You got to do everything indoors. Texas and Georgia pay good money to their high school football coaches and they develop kids. Yeah, for sure. For sure. All right, guys, that's going to be it for tonight. I got to go to sleep. I'll see you guys tomorrow for our middle of the day stream, and we'll talk some more about the weekend and everything, and obviously the new top 25 rankings that are coming out and everything like that.